Very good evening to all of you once again. I'm ever so thankful to have you all with me as always. Welcome back. We left off in 2 Kings 3 with the three allied armies defeating those of Moab because the Lord told Elisha, the successor to Elijah, he told Elisha how to go about it. We now pick up in 2 Kings 4. This is a very important chapter. I say that about a lot of chapters, but this is very important. Very easy to overlook the significance of this chapter. If someone were to ask me, who do I believe is the greatest prophet in the Old Testament? I wouldn't say Moses and I wouldn't say Elijah. I would say Elisha, his successor. This chapter is one of the primary reasons why I would say Elisha. So much of the Lord shines through in this chapter that Elisha is a foreshadowing of Christ himself. We'll see four miracles, at least four stories of miracles, four events in these 44 verses in this chapter. Pay close attention. Now there cried a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets unto Elisha, saying, Thy servant my husband is dead, and thou knowest that thy servant did fear the Lord, and the creditor is come to take unto him my two sons to be bondmen. So this son of the prophet, he would have been a prophet himself, loved the Lord. At the very least, this prophet would have been a student of Elijah and most likely also Elisha at this time. So Elisha knew him and his wife very well. But whenever it comes down to knowing that he has this grieving widow now, because the prophet is dead, he had some debt, and he also has a wife. Many people believe that if you just live the bachelor life your entire life, that you'll be more blessed by the Lord. Not true at all. Matter of fact, the scripture is pretty adamant that a man should have a wife. But if you can go without, it's good also. Joseph Benson said, Though the prophets were wholly devoted to sacred employments, yet were not excluded from marriage any more than the priests and the Levites. Now, on the matter of debt in general, no comment really on the character of this prophet. I'm certain he was a great man of God. But just on leaving an inheritance, not leaving your family with debt, the Bible speaks on it like this, Proverbs 13:22, A good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children, and the wealth of the sinner is laid up for the just. So a man of God should strive to leave something for his children and his grandchildren. So this prophet, he dies, he's in debt, and the creditors come up and they say, well, due to the law, we are allowed to take your two sons as bond servants, meaning that they will pay off their father's debt through their servitude. Charles Ellicott commented on this. They would have to continue in servitude until the year of Jubilee, which would have been every 50 years. After 50 years, then all the bond servants are freed. It's a specific date, meaning that if you went into servitude on the 49th year, then you only had to work a year. The ancient Roman law was more severe, for it contained no provision for the future release of the unhappy debtor. And Elisha said unto her, What shall I do for thee? Tell me, what hast thou in the house? And she said, Thine handmaid hath not anything in the house, save a pot of oil. Then he said, Go, borrow thee vessels abroad of all thy neighbors, even empty vessels, borrow not a few. He says, Go to your neighbors and borrow a lot of vessels, like clay pots and such. And when thou art come in, thou shalt shut the door upon thee and upon thy sons, and shalt pour out into all those vessels, and thou shalt set aside that which is full. There's an importance that's often overlooked in this verse. He's saying the little bit of anointing oil that you have, start pouring it into these pots, these vessels, these bowls. Start pouring them into it. It's not going to stop until all of them are full. Well, you also have to notice he says, "Thou shalt shut the door upon thee and upon thy sons." Okay, so this is a secret thing. Don't do this publicly because everybody's probably going to be wanting this. Even the rich are going to want this, like the golden goose. He says, no, this is something God wishes to do and to bless you. So she went from him and shut the door upon her and upon her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured out. And it came to pass when the vessels were full that she said unto her son, Bring me yet a vessel. And he said unto her, There is not a vessel more. And the oil stayed, meaning that the oil stopped pouring out once the vessels were full. Charles Spurgeon commented on how many vessels that she actually had to fill. If she borrowed few vessels, he says, she would have but little oil. If she borrowed many vessels, they should all be filled, and she should have much oil. She was herself to measure out what she should have, and I believe that you and I, in the matter of spiritual blessings from God, have more to do with the measurement of our mercies than we think. We make our blessings little because our prayers are little. I love what he says right there. He says we have more to do with the measurement of our mercies and blessings than we truly think. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, Go, sell the oil, and pay thy debt, and live thou and thy children of the rest. Oil, back then especially, was quite the commodity. It was used for many different reasons. Soothing the skin, they'd use it to soothe the skin, nutrition, lighting lamps, anointing, and many other purposes. Now the second event. And it fell on a day that Elisha passed to Shunem, where was a great woman, and she constrained him to eat bread. And so it was that as oft as he passed by, he turned in thither to eat bread. So it says that this woman is a great woman, meaning that she was a woman of wealth. She was well off financially. And she said unto her husband, Behold now, I perceive that this is a holy man of God, which passeth by us continually. Let us make a little chamber, I pray thee, on the wall, and let us set for him there a bed, and a table, and a stool, and a candlestick. And it shall be, when he cometh to us, that he shall turn in thither. This was great generosity from these people. I meet a lot of Christians that are nothing like these people right here, and these people they have been blessed with wealth, and they're still very considerate and kind. Yeah, I mean, just spews from the verses just how kind, especially this woman, that she was unto this prophet. And this is a great thing to look at because a lot of people can look at rich people as being pompous and nose up in the air, thinking that they're better than. This shows clearly that it's not always the case. You see, it's not a matter of money; it's a matter of the heart. A man can have literally billions of dollars and still have a very good heart. And it fell on a day that he came thither, and he turned into the chamber and lay there. And he said to Gehazi his servant, Call this Shunammite. And when he had called her, she stood before him. And Elisha said unto Gehazi, Say now unto her, Behold, thou hast been careful for us with all this care. What is it to be done for thee? Wouldst thou be spoken for to the king, or to the captain of the host? And she answered, I dwell among mine own people. She doesn't want a thing from the prophet, except something that she may believe is kind of impossible at this point. And he said, What then is to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, Verily, she hath no child, and her husband is old. And he said, Call her. And when he had called her, she stood in the door. And he said, About this season, according to the time of life, thou shalt embrace a son. And she said, Nay, my lord, thou man of God, do not lie unto thine handmaid. You see, with all the wealth in the world, the best things in life we cannot buy. There is no amount of money that you could have bought, you parents out there, that you could have bought to have the child that you have now, or the children. There's no amount of money that I could have ever paid to have had my parents. We can't pay for salvation. Another thing that cannot be bought is peace of mind. Back in April, Eminem, very wealthy, worldwide known. Everything in the world is at his disposal, seemingly. But what about a peace of mind? This is from Fox News. In early April, Eminem born Marshall Mathers awakened to find a man standing behind him. Clinton Township police officer Adam Stockoe said in testimony, he wakes up in his mansion with lots of security all over the place and still finds this guy right behind him. What was this guy doing? Here's the actual headline from Fox News. Eminem's home invader allegedly said he was there to kill the rapper. Officer testifies. You cannot buy a peace of mind, no matter how much wealth that someone has. The best things in life cannot be bought. This woman with all her wealth, she never could pay to have her womb open to childbearing. But 1 year later, and the woman conceived and bare a son, at that season that Elisha had said unto her according to the time of life. And when the child was grown, it fell on a day that he went out to his father to the reapers. And he said unto his father, my head, my head. And he said to a lad, carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon and then died. Jameson Fawcett Brown actually commented on what may have happened to the boy, and it's pretty much across the board. Everyone agrees it was a heat stroke, sunstroke. The cries of the boy, the part affected, and the season of the year make it probable that he had been overtaken by a stroke of the sun. Pain, stupor, and inflammatory fever are the symptoms of the disease, which is often fatal. Heat stroke, also called sunstroke, is the most serious heat-related illness. It occurs when the body's temperature is 104 degrees or higher, and it is a life-threatening medical emergency. If not treated immediately, heat stroke can damage multiple organs and systems, including the brain and nervous system and such. So what does the mother do? Her son comes in, and he dies on her lap. Well, she went up and laid the young boy on the bed of the man of God and shut the door upon him and went out. She didn't make funeral arrangements. She actually went and said, let me go get the prophet. That's true faith. Adam Clark said she had no doubt heard that Elijah had raised the widow's son of Zarephath to life, and she believed that he who had obtained this gift of God for her could obtain his restoration to life. And she called unto her husband and said, send me, I pray thee, one of the young men and one of the asses, that I may run to the man of God and come again. And he said, wherefore wilt thou go to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. And she said, it shall be well. A very difficult time to say it is well. She's saying it's all right. That's great faith. We should all learn from this. Then she saddled an ass and said to her servant, drive and go forward, slack not thy riding for me, except I bid thee. So she went and came unto the man of God to Mount Carmel. And it came to pass, when the man of God saw her afar off, that he said to Gehazi his servant, behold, yonder is that Shunammite. This is about 16 miles. And Elisha, even he immediately knows who it is. Run now, I pray thee, to meet her, and say unto her, is it well with thee? Is it well with thy husband? Is it well with the child? And she answered, it is well. I believe that at this point, she's just trying to hold it all together. You know, someone can have great faith and still be very tormented inside and have so many doubts. And that comes out in this very next verse. And when she came to the man of God to the hill, she caught him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to thrust her away. And the man of God said, let her alone, for her soul is vexed within her, and the Lord hath hid it from me, and hath not told me. So learn that just because you're in despair, that doesn't mean that you have little faith. That means that you are human. Then she said, did I desire a son of my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive me? Then he said to Gehazi, gird up thy loins, and take my staff in thine hand, and go thy way. If thou meet any man, salute him not, and if any salute thee, answer him not again, and lay my staff upon the face of the child. This actually would work. And Elisha is notorious for doing this. He has such faith that he says, it's not me showing up that's going to do anything. It's God that does it, and anyone can just take my staff with them and do that. And the mother of the child said, as the Lord liveth and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And he arose and followed her. So Gehazi, he's took off. He's way ahead. He's probably younger than Elisha. So he's took off. He reaches the child before they do. But here's the thing: when Gehazi touches the child as Elisha commanded him, the child, nothing happens, and it's believed because of this woman's a little bit of lack of faith right here. Jesus often talked about ye of little faith, and her faith may be waning at this point. So it's believed that if she would have just went with Gehazi instead of only believing that the Spirit of the Lord worked through Elisha, then the child would have been brought back by these staff. And Gehazi passed on before them and laid the staff upon the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing, wherefore he went again to meet him and told him, saying, the child is not awaked. And when Elisha was come into the house, behold, the child was dead, and laid upon his bed. He went in therefore and shut the door upon them twain and prayed unto the Lord. I believe there's a couple of reasons why he shut the door and didn't allow it to be so public. First of all, what he was about to do would seemingly be strange to them. But it happens in a couple of instances to Elijah and Paul even. This very same thing happens. But also, no distractions. Just God, the prophet, and the dead child. And Elisha went up and lay upon the child, and put his mouth upon his mouth, and his eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands, and he stretched himself upon the Lord, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. It began to come back upon this. Elijah did the same thing, but so did Paul. A lot of people don't remember this about the Apostle Paul. If you'll remember Eutychus, whenever Paul's preaching, and it even says that he preaches long, he's probably 2 or 3 hours into preaching, and Eutychus, he falls asleep on the third tier and falls out of the window, and he dies. Well, and Paul went down and fell on him, and embracing him said, trouble not yourselves, for his life is in him. So Paul did the same gesture as Elijah and Elisha. The only man in whomever was involved in a resurrection and didn't go through these particular motions was Jesus. Jesus wouldn't go in and hug them and embrace them and beg God to bring them to life. Jesus just commanded, come to life. Come forth. Lazarus, come forth. I love that. So the boy's body is becoming warm. Then Elisha returned and walked in the house to and fro, and went up and stretched himself upon him. And the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. Obviously, probably dirt had gotten in his sinuses and such. And so whenever he comes back to life, he immediately feels that irritation and just starts sneezing like crazy. And he called Gehazi and said, call this Shunammite. So he called her, and when she was come in unto him, he said, take up thy son. Then she went in and fell at his feet and bowed herself to the ground and took up her son and went out. Let this be evidence that it's quite a benefit to know a great godly man and to befriend them. I've experienced this in my own life even. But it also says in the book of James how the prayers of a righteous man availeth much. So the closer that someone is to the Lord, if you love them as a friend, then quite a few blessings can come from that. Quite a few miracles. So that's the second event. Now we're coming up on the third. These are very quick right here. And Elisha came again to Gilgal, and there was a dearth in the land, and the sons of the prophets were sitting before him. And he said unto his servant, set on the great pot, and seeth pottage for the sons of the prophets. This is believed to be part of the famine we'll read about in 2 Kings 8. There's a 7-year famine in the land, and this is believed to be one of the events that actually happened right here. And one went out into the field to gather herbs, and found a wild vine, and gathered thereof wild gourds his lapful, and came and shred them into the pot of pottage, for they knew them not. A wild vine would have been somewhat bad for the body. So they poured out for the men to eat, and it came to pass, as they were eating of the pottage, that they cried out and said, O thou man of God, there is death in the pot, and they could not eat thereof. It's widely believed that this was the colocynth, or the vine of Sodom, as it's called. It is found in that region, and if it's referred to as the wild cucumber, and if you eat too much of it, it can be fatal. But Elisha said, Then bring meal. And he cast it into the pot, and he said, Pour out for the people that they may eat. And there was no harm in the pot. Meal would have been its flour, and it's just a little bit, just like the salt that he poured in the waters at Jericho, just a little bit. And the Lord used that to miraculously heal this up as he did the waters of Jericho. It's the Lord doing these things, but through and allowing Elisha to do these little gestures like pour the salt in or to pour the flour in to the pottage, then it's exalting Elisha in their eyes. This is a great man of God, very great. So that was the third event. Here's the last event. And there came a man from Shalisha, and brought the man of God bread of the first fruits, 20 loaves of barley, and full ears of corn, and the husk thereof. And he said, Give unto the people that they may eat. This is Elisha talking to this man. And he's bringing Elisha the first fruits. He's not bringing them to the priest of the land or to any of the Levites. The only person that you could probably really knew for certain served the true God was Elisha. So this is like him bringing his tithes to a true preacher that he knew wouldn't corrupt it. But now notice, before we come to the end of this chapter, a lot of people remember Jesus feeding the thousands, many more than right here, because there's only about 100 men here, probably just a couple hundred people or so. But he's bringing more loaves to Elisha in order to feed fewer people. But this is a great foreshadowing of a man of God feeding a multitude with just a few. And Elisha, outside of Christ, is the only man to really do this. And his servitor said, What, should I set this before 100 men? He said again, Give the people that they may eat, for thus saith the Lord, They shall eat, and shall leave thereof. So he set it before them, and they did eat, and left thereof, according to the word of the Lord. I would give final thoughts on this, but I believe that Albert Barnes sums it up the best. This miracle was a faint foreshadowing of our Lord's far more marvelous feeding of thousands with even scantier materials. The resemblance is not only in the broad fact, but in various minute particulars, such as the distribution through the hands of others, the material, bread, the surprised question of the servant. As Elijah was a type of John the Baptist, so Elisha was in many respects a type of our blessed Lord. In his peaceful, non-ascetic life, in his mild and gentle character, in his constant circuits, in his many miracles of mercy, in the healing virtue which abode in his bodily frame, he resembled, more than any other prophet, the Messiah, of whom all prophets were more or less shadows and figures. So the next time someone tells you about how marvelous that Elijah and Moses and all these other Old Testament prophets were, remind them of Elisha. Very few give him the kind of credit that is really owed to him. The Lord used Elisha more than any other man, I believe, in the old times. But that is the study for today. I am ever so thankful that you all could join me once again, as always. Until tomorrow, God willing, we will be in chapter 5. God, peace be with you. Amen.